Hi, I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenwiller with the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. I'm here to bring you your latest in the 2023 Alaska Breakup Outlook and Update. So taking a look at this picture behind me is kind of a good way to start out. This was the Big Eddy Ice Jam upstream of Galena last week. This was taken by our Riverwatch team as they were flying over the area on May 19th. And you can see there plenty of ice, a little bit of a jam, and that has obviously since moved away from that area, moved downstream, and now we're tracking this long run of ice and a surge of higher water behind it as it makes its way towards the lower Yukon. So as always, we've been encouraging folks to stay flood ready in this very dynamic and historic year, and with that, a couple tips for how to stay flood ready. Do the plan, make your plan before it happens. Do you know if you're in a flood-prone area, a low-lying area? Do you know if there's an ice jam upstream or downstream from your location? What's the fastest way to get to higher ground, and how will you do that? Do you have a good communication plan with your family? And what roads or areas are the most likely to flood if the water should start to rise? With some of these ice jams, we have seen the water rise quite quickly, and so this is a good time now to take action and make sure you have your plan in place and know how to communicate with those that you love so that you can stay safe. So let's talk about our couple components that have contributed to this dynamic year. The snowpack continues to be a contributor, especially for the upper Yukon. Ice thickness and strength continues to become less of a factor now as most of our ice has moved out, but we're still watching the lower Yukon where ice remains intact, although it is deteriorating. And of course, our spring weather patterns with a very cool April that has really allowed this to be a more dynamic year. And we started out May cool, then we warmed up to normal temperatures. Thus, we increased a lot of snowmelt into the mountains, from the mountains into the tributaries, and that has really helped to drive those water levels up, especially for a lot of the communities along the Kuskokwim and the Yukon. So with that, what does our current snowpack look like? Well, in general, it's deteriorated from the lower elevations. You can see here really stretching out from the Yukon area all the way down through the Kuskokwim, just a little bit left there in southwest Alaska. So really for snowmelt, we don't expect a whole lot more to contribute now, but we still have plenty of high water working its way from the Dawson area on down to the west. North of the Brooks Range, we still have plenty of snowmelt, and so we'll be keeping an eye on that area as a potential contributor for the rivers up there like the Sag River. As we look at our high temperatures expected as we go into the end of this week and into the weekend, we're actually going to see a little bit of a cooling trend, which should help to temper those snow melt rates. So a little bit less water being added into the tributaries, which should be some good news. Generally, we've been in the 70s up in this upper Yukon area, and we should see highs only in the 50s and 60s as we head into the weekend with a lot more cloud cover. We do expect things to continue to hold around 60 for the headwaters of the Kuskokwim River, but again, we're not really looking for a whole lot more increase in temperatures going into this weekend. As we look out a little bit farther in time to the first week of June here, you can see generally our long-range outlook from the Climate Prediction Center has most of the southern half of the state in cooler than normal conditions. It's only if you get up north of the north slope, that you start to see a little bit above normal conditions up there. So this, again, should help to slow the snowmelt from any of the higher elevations. And other than that, though, we expect breakup to continue to move on down towards the lower reaches of these rivers and out towards the Bering Sea. So looking at the breakup map now and the flood potential that we have, still really focused on snowmelt here for the upper portions of the Yukon, with some places still being in the moderate range, such as Fort Yukon and Stevens Village. Those are two of the areas that have been hit pretty hard and continue to see high water. And then as we get down towards the lower Yukon, that's our real next area of focus of concern. Some ice jams between Russian Mission and Mountain Village continue to be in place. They are moving various times, and it's hard to know exactly what the latest information is. So stay in touch with your local emergency officials and weather.gov for the latest information, but that's the area that we're the most concerned about now as we watch these ice jams slide towards Amonuk and Aluknuk. Looking at the breakup map, you can see mostly open for much of the state here. It's just really along the Brooks Range for the Sag and Colville rivers and out a little bit there towards the Kobuk River that we still see some ice conditions holding in place. And then again, those ice conditions still by the lower Yukon where we have a few warnings and advisories that we'll talk about here in just a minute. So in general, what happened as far as the breakup dates? Well, it was with our track as late as we thought it would be, about 9 to 11 days late across the Kuskokwim, but we have now declared the Kuskokwim done with breakup. The Riverwatch team has moved out of that area and is now focused on the lower Yukon. And taking a look at those conditions across the Kuskokwim, you can see all of our river gauges indicate a dropping in water level, and you can see no ice there on any of the cameras from Bethel over to Crooked Creek area. And so even though conditions were pretty historic in those spots, we are now seeing things start to have that water subside and continue to subside. How about for the Yukon? Well, in general, it was pretty late there as well, 4 to 8 days late for most of our areas, and we do still have Ammonok left to go, so we'll be tracking that one, but again, expecting about 4 to 8 days late from that normal time frame. So here in the next couple days, probably into the weekend, is when we expect Ammonok to finally go out. Starting upstream and looking downstream from Fort Yukon, here's a couple shots from yesterday, just showing that high water primarily from snowmelt. This is around the airport terminal and then again around the tribal hall. Those water levels did not come up quite as high as they did with the initial breakup, but they remain high now, so a flood warning is still in effect for Fort Yukon. Galena, this is where that surge of high water that was behind the initial front has really taken its time to move through, and this is the piece of water that we continue to track here in the later stages of the breakup. This high water is going to have to make its way all the way down through the lower Yukon, so you can see we probably have crested at Galena in the last 24 to 48 hours, but it's going to be a slow track on the way down now, so that's the piece that we are continuing to monitor very closely for you. Here at Russian Mission, you can see that water level come up very quickly there. Sunday and Monday climbed very quickly along the banks as ice jammed about 18 miles downstream. We've had some fluctuation since then, but it really is hard to determine exactly where that breakup front and that ice jam is located downstream of Russian Mission now. Here we can see, though, when that jam did move just a little bit, the water levels at Pilot Station rose several feet, on the order of about 5 to 6 feet. And so that's that ice jam that we are tracking the most closely now, and we'll get to our warning map here in just a second to take a look at that. For the shore-fast ice, this is what we're now watching near Ammonok and Aluknuk to make sure that that ice and that water that's coming has a place to exit. The good news is we're seeing some deterioration courtesy of our ice desk, so we're hoping that that continues and we'll have a space for that water to go out into the Bering Sea. So finally, our watches and warnings map, again, warning for Fort Yukon, a warning for Stevens Village, and then warnings really stretching now from Russian Mission all the way out through Mountain Village, a watch downstream from Ammonok and Aluknuk. Again, that's our target area where we have the most concern as those jams start to move their way through, but once it jams up, it can, of course, lead to a very quick rise on those waters, and so that's where we want folks to be flood ready. We want to say a huge heartfelt thanks to all of the folks who have contributed to the observations that we've received this year. It's been an overwhelming support and effort. Tons of information coming through on social media, tons of information from phone calls and emails. We really appreciate it all. Of course, our hearts and our thoughts are with all of those who have been affected by the floods, and we just want to help to stay as far ahead and keep folks as safe as possible. Thanks for joining us.